scared me so bad because I was listening to the audiobook and it was like 10:30 at night. Anyway, hello everyone.
Yes. The one for part 7, I agree. I accidentally just listened to that. I was like,
okay. Yeah, all the other ones were so like chill, and then part 7, it was just haunted house almost.
Yeah, I got a Voxer from Stephanie at like 10:30 at night. When she heard that, I didn't hear it till this morning, but I was like laughing so hard.
I needed someone to hear my pain.
I didn't listen to that one. Now I got to go back.
Listen to it at like full volume in a quiet room.
I could post a Spotify link for it.
Oh God.
Yes.
Hello.
Anyway,
hello everyone.
Yeah.
I'm Nancy
and Christy.
Hi, Christy.
And
still my Korean account. I don't know how to change that.
That's
so weird.
It's very strange.
But anyway, welcome to our live show. We're discussing parts 1 through 7 of Anathem by Neil Stephenson. So would you guys like to just, I guess, briefly introduce yourselves in case everybody should know who you are, but just in case we have new people. I guess, Tiffany, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Tiffany. My channel name is Beautiful Minutiae. And this is my first time reading this book. I think for most of it, it's our first time, but I know for Rich, it's not because he loves this book and highly recommended it. So it's a little bit outside my comfort zone, I think. But it's been a fun ride so far.
Good.
Well, my name is Rich, and I'm just Rich. And I don't know, this is probably my 4th or 5th time reading the book, so you can probably guess what I think about it. And I don't know, that my enjoying the book might say more about me than the book, but welcome to my madness.
I'm Christy Lewis. My channel is Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space, and it's in space because in theory I really love sci-fi. I've really loved a lot of sci-fi that I've read, but I haven't actually read a lot of sci-fi. So yay, I'm finally reading one and loving it. So thank you to Rich for recommending it.
I'm sorry, there's a bird outside and her tail is really going. She's like so laser focused right now.
She's staring.
Yeah, this is Lucy. If you don't know her.
Gotta put on the Gregorian chant.
I know. Get her back on track.
Maybe like we could change it somehow cat-like, like a Perorian chant.
Oh, okay. We're over it, I guess. She's like, no, I'm done. Don't do it. So yeah, this is my first time reading it too. I guess, do we want to do just brief spoiler-free thoughts and then we can delve into spoilers?
Sure.
I still have it in my head, the comparison that Tiffany made to Name of the Rose. I see it all the time. I'm just like, yes. It reminds me so much of Name of the Rose.
It's like a sci-fi Name of the Rose.
Yes, it is.
At least the beginning.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophical.
Read the Name of the Rose.
Yeah, it's an Italian book that's like set in the Middle Ages, and there's like these priests who are coming into this monastery because someone's been killed and they're trying to figure out what's going on. But most of the book, rather than being mystery, is much more like philosophical discussions. So the setting in the beginning of them having all these philosophical discussions in a monastery setting is what reminded me so much of Name of the Rose.
Okay.
And the fact that it's so chunky.
Yeah.
That's you. Yeah, it's kind of misleading because like my font is huge. And so I was like, this won't take that long to get through, but it's so ideologically dense that it forces you to slow down, which is not like a bad thing, but it definitely felt a little indulgent. And I'm very much a character-driven reader, so it was really hard for me to get into it at first because it was like, I want to be with the characters, and so it wasn't bad, but it was different than what I'm used to.
Yeah, I think what's his name? Daniel Green gave it like a 2 out of 10 on characters, which is
Oh yeah.
about right. I mean, they're fine. They serve their purpose. But yeah, it's the I of course I really enjoyed the book, but it is very indulgent. I do feel like the pacing at a few points, like especially what was it, part 6, or maybe it was part 7 actually. I feel like that could have been compressed a bit, um, but yeah, this is spoiler free, so I won't say too much about that. But the something I like about it is the dynamics of it's mostly about ideas. It's actually, I think, in a lot of ways, a story about human nature. Or at least there's a lot of that. I mean, it's got a lot of concepts, but also a lot of human nature. Something I like about it is that, really, so far, most of the characters seem well-meaning in their intent. Yet, all these, there have been a lot of little conflicts that come up despite all that. So it's, I kind of like that dynamic of it. And I don't know, I like this. I feel like this book is very representative of Stevenson, but his books are all different. Like there's nothing else said of none of his books are like this. But stylistically, like the indulgent tangents and weaving a lot of crazy ideas together. The criticism I've heard of this book is that most of the ideas aren't actually original, which I think is true. But I think the way he synthesizes them is very creative. And so I'm hit and miss on his books, but this is my favorite of his.
You can definitely tell he's an incredibly intelligent person.
Oh yeah, way smarter than me.
Like I'm super impressed because I felt like a dummy for most of this.
I still feel like a dummy, and a lot of that has to do with the mathematical and quantum mechanics kind of discussions. I'm like, I don't have even the slightest clue what you are saying, but I like the philosophical discussions.
Yeah.
But when we go off into the sciencey stuff, I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully it'll come together.
Well, the interesting thing is these are concepts that don't really go together. And I like that a lot of his inspiration is like ancient Greeks. Because if you look at ancient Greece, the philosophers and the scientists and the mathematicians were all the same people.
Yeah.
And so like you see like Aristotle's talking, he'll be talking about geometry and then he'll be talking about, philosophy or whatever. And so it's a very classical sort of view of like the synthesis of it all.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I keep like, and I kind of messaged Tiffany and Dia when I first started it because I was like, I don't know what's going on. But I compared it to Malazan because with Gardens of the Moon, because I just reread that for the first time. And so it was like in Gardens of the Moon, we get a little bit more character development. So I felt a little more grounded. Whereas in this one, I just kind of felt like I didn't know where I was going. It had some interesting like stops along the way, but I was like, I have no idea what's going on or anything. So it was an interesting reading experience. And I just had to like trust the process, which was hard for me.
Yes.
I feel like we're at the point now where the plot is finally starting to pick up. Like
Yeah.
part 7 is where I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yes.
Like until that point, there were moments where I'm like, oh, that conversation's cool, or like, oh, there's this little bit developing over here, but it was so small, even though it like is I'm guessing what the rest of the book is kind of hinging on, which again, we're in the spoiler free section, but it was just like little tiny peaks here and there. And now I feel like we're moving physically in the book. The characters are moving a lot, but also like the plot itself is moving more, which is making it feeling a little bit more cohesive.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Oh, yeah.
I think
the plot
like,
oh, go ahead, Christy.
All right. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, the plot definitely it's like a slow rip, but then it definitely, and by the time you get towards the end of the book, it's resolving, and it's definitely a rising action sort of book. Pretty much the entire book. I think I've heard it argued that the first element of the plot is arguably around page 100. But that said, almost all of the early, like everything up before then, almost everything has callbacks. You may have seen some of them already, and there's more. Like even 1 or 2 pages in, there's a callback to like the very end of the book.
Interesting.
I feel like the first maybe 80 pages, I had like probably 5 tabs, which isn't very much for me if you look at my books. Because mostly I was like, okay, I just have to sort of get my vaccination here of all these different words. It's like reading in another language. You have to be very patient because you don't know what any of the words mean, unless you have a dictionary, which I don't know, maybe there is one in here, but it wouldn't surprise me. I didn't check. But after that point, like Rich said, like right around page 100, I was like tabbing a lot, and it really, from like page 100-ish onward, I was like fascinated until like the part where they're just driving for a really long time. I forget which part it's in, maybe part 6 or part 7. Then I was like, okay, I'm waiting. But then it picked up again. So yeah, it's been a little bit uneven for me, but like the vast majority of it, I've just loved it because the words kind of get defined as you go on.
Right.
So yeah, I'm loving it. It's so immersive for me. It's like I really am like, okay, so there's stuff in the food that makes people outside the mass different, and there's just like there's so many things that sort of set the world building apart in my mind that I find really interesting.
I like, just spoiler free too, how many things have different names but are the same thing in our world.
Right,
which
like a G-Jaw.
Yeah, so that kept me going too, because it was like, oh, I know what this is. So I thought that was really cool.
I think there's a scene, and this is not spoilery, but there's a scene during, I think it's part 2, and someone's like eating in the math or consent or whatever. One of the outsiders is in there, and it talks about his G-Jaw going off, and he's talking, and everyone's like, someone's like presenting something right now. Like, what are you doing? And he's like making some sort of business deal. And at that point, I didn't realize that a G-Jaw was similar to a cell phone, so I was cracking up because I'm like, oh, like. It's just so funny.
Yes.
I'm interested to hear your take on that, because that's actually one of the other popular criticisms is the fact that everything's got a different name. And I don't want to comment too much on it because it's actually spoilery for even stuff you haven't read. But I do feel like, because you're actually learning a lot of science and philosophy in this book, but you don't actually learn the names, like the actual, like, like the Adraconic theorem, which is the Pythagorean theorem, or
the razor, Occam's razor is in here. I forget what it's something's
Gardan's steel yard, I think they call it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Oh, I gained an IQ point. I know what Occam's razor is. this is one of those books where I feel like I have to reread it to get like, and have my little like board with all my little cords to like connect all the threads.
Yeah. The world setting up is very heavy in this.
Yeah,
for sure.
And even parts like, without getting the spoilers, like the part you're talking about where they're driving around, so that's one of those segments of the book that, and driving around on the ice, and that kind of stuff. That whole section I could have been half the length or less, and that would have made it better. But that said, there's actually, it's like rereading Wheel of Time. There's a lot of world building, like just in the scenery and the things going on and describing. Like, it's a very interesting world when you, and we'll get into the spoilers later, but I have a whole bunch of thoughts about the world building side. I'm kind of curious of everybody's take.
Okay. Well, if everybody's good, then we can just jump into spoilers unless anybody has any. Okay. Because I'm going to let Rich lead this section because you're the expert.
Oh.
Or at least
honestly,
because you have notes.
Well, I do have notes. I've been collecting notes for a while on this one. One of the what my background, for me, the science stuff was actually pretty familiar. Like quantum mechanics. I mean, at least at the level that's in this book. And actually, we haven't really gotten into any quantum mechanics. There's been some orbital mechanics and mostly philosophy, and just scientific principles, like just, action, reaction, that kind of stuff. But so that stuff was familiar, but the philosophy was much less familiar my first time. And I definitely felt a lot like you guys did my first read. I mean, it definitely, when you read the book 5 times, it also helps I've read all the stuff, and I've read a lot of Sanderson, which actually has a lot of common themes in it. And then you come back and read this again, and you're going back and forth. You definitely get a lot more out of it.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I can see that.
So,
can you keep
in terms of the
characters?
world building,
Yeah,
what did you guys think of the world building? Because I imagine by now you probably have a pretty good idea of what's going on.
it's a first contact story.
Yeah, there's
yeah.
Well, I can't decide if it's that. They also talked about the possibility of people from their world being sent up and then going around the world at a different pace, and it could actually be people. They mentioned that at one point, and they might have said that that's why they call them the cousins.
Yeah, so I think that's why I feel
I don't
kind
know
of
which one it is,
because it's like I'm 530 pages in, but I'm not 100% sure where this is going yet.
I actually don't know why we're looking for Orolo, because I don't know if they're looking for him because he has more information, because he left a lot of stuff behind that they have. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they're looking for him because he has more, he's done more research, because he set up the Spielicaptor, and he, but they have some of the footage and stuff that he set up. So
yeah.
Oh, I loved all of that. The sneaking around and trying to get the footage, and how there's all these politics within the maths, and I just, all the intrigue inside the, what do you call them? Monasteries? I don't know what maths.
Yeah.
That was really fascinating, and I just enjoyed it so much. I was reveling in all of that.
Yeah, I like that the religion circles around that. It just took me a while to get my head around it, but I think it's a really interesting, cool world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and it's it's a secular form of religion, essentially.
Right.
Took monasticism and then applied it to scientists who are essentially caged up in these little prisons where they can't cause trouble. And it's, so, and then in terms of the conflict, all the internal politics, Sir Trestinus, the Warden Regulan, is kind of a bad guy, but you think about it, they're just doing their job, it's, they're not out to get anybody, kind of, although there's maybe a hint of personal conflict of interest, like when she throws the book at Erasmus and all that. But so it's so identifiable or relatable.
I will say the one thing I can't quite wrap my head around with the world building, this is just one component that they have now explained more in part 7, but my brain still can't visualize it, is the spheres and all the things that they can do. And they were explaining how it worked when he was rescuing, what's his name? Was it Laro? One of the guys that fell down, and he's rescuing him, and he's wrapping him up. And he's like, well, if you do this, you can change it like that. And I was like, I still can't picture that or how that works in my brain.
Yeah, I think that was very intentional. The rigging is we have nothing but the sphere, the bolt, and the cord. And it's okay, that, of course.
Whatever that means.
They're sitting on their spheres and moving around. And I was like, what is this?
And I just envisioned it as a bouncy ball with the handle on it.
Yeah.
It's
like an
very
exercise
interesting.
class.
I was imagining a hovering thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's the one thing with the world building that I'm like, I can't even picture what this looks like at all, but I don't have a scientific mind. So I realize that I'm probably not the target audience for this book.
I think also if it had some illustrations, kind of like, Lady Trent has the illustrations of the dragons that are very scientific, I think that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was
Especially for people who
intentional.
aren't visual readers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it was intentional because in the beginning, it comes across as a low technology world. Like they're making wine and raising bees and honey and all, like very stuff Middle Ages. And then it comes out and they've got like a spear, a bolt, and a cord, which you think of as articles of clothing, although the sphere is kind of weird. But then they say things like they made their spheres produce light, or they make them bigger or smaller, which makes them very alien. And then they get into, and our grapes are genetically engineered to have, produce all these wacky flavors and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Orlo is definitely, he's got some of the Gandalf vibes. He's like the wizard.
The wise mentor that then disappears and now they've got to figure things out.
Right. Good luck. Yes.
I have more thoughts on that, which I'll save for the next stream. But yeah, Orlo definitely is kind of set up as, and I think that's kind of why. I mean, everybody looks up to him,
right?
So I think that's motivation enough to go after him, character wise. But yeah, so should we talk about Plato at all? I don't know if we want to get into it because realism and nominalism are sort of the one of the main themes, and it's like a really, this is like Sanderson magic system building. It's sort of like, let's take something that makes no sense to write a story about, and let's write a story about it, like stacking rocks or.
Yes.
So I don't know if everybody kind of caught on to that distinction or not, because that is actually a debate, or at least it was a debate like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm a little bit more familiar with the scientific stuff than the philosophical stuff.
Well, is everybody familiar with the allegory of the cave and Platonic forms and that sort of a thing?
Not very much. I haven't read much Plato.
The concept. Yeah, and there's an analogy in the book which introduces it, which is like the idea of clouds casting shadows on the mountaintop, and the image of the cloud isn't the cloud, and that's a reference to Plato had the allegory of the cave, where a man is like chained up in a cave and can't look around, but he can see light reflecting on the wall, and from the silhouettes and stuff on the wall, he can picture what's happening. And so the idea is that, things around us, conceptually, like there's relationships between the things around us. And so like a chair is a chair, like a chair form follows function, but like the idea of a chair is much more universal than the chair I'm sitting on right now, or whatever.
Okay.
And that's the whole idea. And, Sanderson actually, Sanderson's analogy for all this stuff is like the spiritual realm, which to him was very inspired by this same concept where, and in this book, they get into like the sconic, scones, thought, which actually throws in essentially the cognitive realm, like the idea of perception versus reality, perception, and like the ideas behind it.
Okay.
I think is it kind of similar. Have you read Rich The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis by any chance?
I have. It was a very long time ago.
It's
been a while.
He talks about the concept that Earth is a shadow of heavenly things. So I think it's really similar to that.
Okay.
If you read
that's a similar sort of idea. And of course, I mean, anybody like C.S. Lewis would probably be with a very liberal arts
Familiar.
background would be familiar with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the conversations that I loved that happened not early in the book, but it was in like part 2, was when Orlo and Erasmus are like talking, and they're talking about beauty, and beauty being in the eye of the beholder, rather than like that's not where beauty's actually originating from. You're knowing that it's shining from a different world, and all that. Like, I thought that conversation was so interesting. And that's probably what you're talking about, right, Rich? It's reflected in that conversation.
That's actually you bring that up because there's Deod and Hylia.
That reminded me of Zelda, by the way.
The daughters of Kenoas. Like, there's that analogy where Kenoas is looking up and sees a vision in the sky, and they have interpretations, and the one thinks they saw an equilateral triangle or an isosceles triangle, something like that, and the other thinks that they saw the creator. And it's essentially they both take the same sort of inspiration out of it, but the one is like divine inspiration and the other is the inspiration of order and and logical beauty or whatever. And so it's very related to those concepts as well. Essentially you can talk about it in the same way and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And you've read this mostly by audio, right, Rick? Like over like
I've read it both ways.
You've read it both ways.
And this time I've been switching back and forth.
Okay. Because I think that at that point, that's when I had to start listening via audio. I read the entire first portion, but at that point I had to start switching to audio just because I couldn't read with my eyes for like a solid week. And I sort of lost track of things a bit at that point. And I enjoyed it a lot more when I was reading with my eyes because I could follow those kind of conceptual conversations better than I could over audio.
I agree with that. I feel like I missed a chunk when I wasn't immersion reading it or reading it with my eyes. So
I listened to sections 2 through 4 when I was driving, and the rest of it I've read physically.
Yeah, well, you can get quite a bit either way. Yeah, something that's really interesting here is like this sort of like post-apocalyptic sort of setting. Like they're driving by ruins of cities, and it's like basically they're in a modern era similar to our own technology-wise, but it's been like frozen that way for thousands of years. And so they talk about ruins of ancient cities the way we talk about ruins of ancient cities, except for them, those cities are made out of steel skyscrapers, not, stone and adobe or whatever. And it's kind of, it's a very interesting take on the future. And
yes.
And so, and it's interesting how they sort of the reaction, like it comes up in so many places. Like there's one point they're having a discussion during that drive about being able to repair a car. And it sounds like something that I could hear Louis Rothman or somebody talking about today, right to repair. And like, nobody wants a car that's so fancy that they don't understand how it works and they can't fix it. But on the other hand, if you have your walled garden iPhone that's so nice and convenient and small, but it's just you gotta throw it away when it's too old or whatever, it's so convenient. And it's interesting they're having that debate, but then it's in the context of why are people uncomfortable around all of these avowed who study these exotic things and understand things that ordinary people don't. And I just find that fascinating.
And vice versa.
Yeah. I think the fear of the unknown is so interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like we still get that.
Absolutely.
Well, and there's definitely Dune vibes in it as well, I think, if anybody's read Dune.
I haven't yet, but I'm getting ready to soon.
Oh, okay. I won't say much, but and it's one of those things that it's kind of dropped in. You kind of have to read between the lines to even learn it, but there's something in the background of the story. Like, why is this world the way it is? And it's because in their past, there was a traumatic event and all of culture was reorganized as a result. It's the same thing here. Like you hear it's been mentioned a few times, the terrible events, or the, often talk of the reconstitution. And you don't really know a whole lot about what happened, but, it's clear that there's something that happened in the past that caused everybody to say, whoa, we can't keep doing it like this. We got to take all those crazy scientists and lock them up for everybody's sake.
Yeah, very similar to Stormlight, where it's like the horrible, the recreants, and all that.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good analogy, actually. That is a.
I like that.
Actually, I did not make that connection. That is a really good one. Yeah, and I have like one of my little discussion points, like, is intelligence dysgenic? Like, can society actually progress beyond a certain point? Like, imagine if you get to the point where anybody could make a nuclear bomb in their kitchen or whatever. Is that a sustainable world? Because
not for long.
Like, like we all have replicators. It's like, well, what can you make with these replicators? Can you replicate a life-ending super virus or whatever in your living room? Not just tea Earl Grey hot.
Yeah, and the just the intent behind it. Like, some people would never use it. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like the whole Jurassic Park thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's interesting to think about too. Like, if I could, would I do something like that?
Now, here's a different take on.
Lucy might.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead. Now, here's a different take on all of it, and please chime in because I'm talking a lot here, but the idea of like the scientific, that if you go 3D printers, you can make all kinds of crazy things. Fortunately, not nuclear bombs. But yeah, you can get in trouble with 3D printers. And actually, I know there's a Charles Strauss book that kind of touches on that. Maybe I'll put that next in the chat. But but like the scientific method, like a big part of modern science is communications, like sharing your ideas with other people and building off of them and building blocks. And that's how innovation happens. And this is like a world where all the scientists, they do talk to each other within like this one little group, but basically there's chunks of them that basically have no discourse with anybody else in the world for like 1,000 years. And it's like so interesting to me because, like, on the one hand, obviously, like they have to literally reinvent the wheel, because if somebody someplace else came up with an idea, they don't know about it unless they come up with it themselves or wait 1,000 years. But on the other hand, you hear the criticism of and there are people talking about this way about science today, where there's not enough innovation, there's too much conformism in science, where an idea, like, nobody wants to speak out against the popular idea, and therefore it's hard for crazy ideas to take root. Well, when everybody is isolated in these little pockets, nobody's there to tell them it's a crazy idea for 1,000 years. They can go off and do who knows what with it.
Yeah.
And everybody else is off in their other world. And then the door opens up and who knows what steps out.
That's an interesting thought.
I guess, is that why do you think they do the thousanders, the hundreders, and then like the 10-year people, so that they have all three levels kind of happening? And then they have like the 1 year,
Yeah, the Unarian, like they're like, that's like the university kind of a thing.
Yes.
And there's an analogy, right? Because in the Middle Ages, universities were essentially monasteries. Like, like religious education, secular education were not two different things. Like it was the clergy who educated people. And it was kind of like that. And then you had like the regular clergy off in their, monastery or whatever they did. But it's, it's like there's so many interesting concepts, like parallels. And I think that was a crazy idea Stephenson had, and he just ran with it. But it's just, that's what's so creative about these books. He takes all these really weird ideas that don't feel like they should go together, and somehow he makes them go together.
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's a unique blend of like ideas straight from religion and ideas that are like specifically scientific. And it's interesting that there are like the Deolaters, although it seems like a lot of the mass don't really respect Deolaters. A lot of the not Sans. What are the normal guys called? I can't remember. Avouts. The normal avouts, a lot of them don't really respect the Deolaters, but there are Deolaters, you know. So
yeah,
it's interesting.
There are some orders that do, and that we haven't been following one of them, but they kind of make mention of it. They're definitely, you get the sense they're, a small part. Now there's one point when they're on their little road trip where they actually camp out at a Bayesian Orthodox monastery. And that is a religious monastery. And they make the comment that like, oh, well, this is very familiar. Like the songs they sing are different, but the lifestyle is the same. And I thought that was just very interesting.
Yeah, I think Erasmus right around that time too says like that he'd never been able to like think about what like when people talked about a retreat, he had like no concept for that, and then he realized, oh, my life is a retreat, the kind of retreat that they're talking about.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
What do we have? So earlier, Christy, you mentioned all's well, or stuff in the food and all that, and I thought that was like,
spoiler.
There's like, it's interesting how, and it's like all genetic engineering essentially, which they don't do anymore apparently, but it's, they have these genetically engineered plants that end up in their food, and I think it's mentioned that Avowed can't have children, but seculars, they all are on antidepressants.
Yeah. I thought that was so interesting that once Erasmus has been like in the world for a little while, and he's like, okay, this is fine, I can handle this, and he's like, wait, can I actually handle this, or is it just the all's well in the food that I'm making me not sure if I'm making right decisions or not? And so like that's really interesting where he no longer like fully trusts his own judgment because he's like, is this me or is this the food talking?
That really stuck out to me too, because when I first like read the definition of all's well, it was like, oh, this actually sounds kind of nice.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh wait, this is like Prozac. Like what?
Well, the interesting thing about it is sort of like you think about like the typical comment troll or whatever that we all love so well. In some sense, all's well is like the cure for that, because you don't really care about winning the argument so much. But in some sense, that's kind of like the opposite of their entire lifestyle, where they're all making dinner, and then they're going to stop and watch somebody have an argument and just rigorously destroy the other person, and then they even celebrate, like, who was it that got, was it Kevadocles, or I forget who it was, or no, I forget who it was, but somebody, got planed, and they say, like, there was a big dialogue, and the guy, goes at it so hard that his opponent, kills himself or whatever. And it's just like, it's like, oh my goodness.
It's like they've learned
intellectual gladiators.
Yeah.
Yes. They've learned to kind of let their thought life overtake their emotional lives, which I really have a hard time telling a lot of the characters apart. They all just like seem like the same person to me. But I think that's because that's not as important as the ideas to these people. To a lot of the avouts, their thought life is a lot more important than their emotions.
That's interesting though. That makes sense, because I'm a very character-driven reader. And so I think that's the hard part for me. Because it's hard for me to tell them apart. And then when you said that, it was like a light bulb. Like, that makes so much sense why I'm struggling.
This is very typical classic sci-fi. Like, you read Isaac Asimov or anybody like the characters and even the plots are kind of generic. It's all about the ideas, and that was when it. So Daniel Green gave this book an 8 out of 10, but like all his normal like rating components were like 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10. And because like the characters, the plot, the this, the that, the pace, it's like, but then like the execution on the concept, which he kind of added as a category for like conceptual sci-fi, where it's like, to him it was a 10 out of 10. And so that's very typical. If you read Stephenson, now a lot of them have like this quirky, zany humor to them. I mean, it's fun. It can be a fun ride if you sort of go with it.
Yeah, his writing is
but
funny.
they're definitely more about the idea.
Yeah. Was it
gas fighting dragons?
Dragon, yes.
Yeah.
I had to stop and reread that because I was like, he didn't just say that, and I was cracking up.
Speaking of Name of the Rose, even that part, it reminds me of a conversation that they have about like unicorns in Name of the Rose. I'm like, are unicorns really real? And if they are, what does this mean with this and this? And I was just like, yep, this is just driving it home for me even more, reminding me of that of these like hypothetical mythological creatures and like.
Now I need to go read this book.
You might really like it.
Was it written during the Regency period?
No, it was written in like the 70s or 80s. It's not that old.
Oh.
I thought it was older than it was when I went to.
It's set in like the 14th century, but it was written in like the 70s.
But he was wasn't he the guy who had like thousands of books in his library? I think it was Umberto Eco.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything about him as a person.
It's like something like 5,000 books or something like that. It was a lot.
I think I heard that before.
Yeah. Because I was like, no wonder his book is huge.
Yeah.
He reads everything.
He has so many thoughts to share.
Having a lighter question. Avocations. What would your avocation be?
Oh, I don't know.
Other than knitting.
I can knit, so that wouldn't be that for me. I could see myself doing like gardening because I'd want something outdoorsy from all the studying indoors. So maybe, I don't know, because my other hobby is like I'd love to read. So it's like, well, that wouldn't be my avocation. That would just be me being in about.
I feel like I'm gonna kind of steal your answer because I feel like that would be me too. Because I've gotten really into like houseplants and gardening the last year and a half, and I could maybe like farm and shear my own wool from the sheep and get knitting back.
Stephanie, we should be cat farmers. That's what
we could.
There are no cats in this consent math, whatever it is, but there should be. I feel like that goes really well.
And they can help guard the farm. Cats, they don't care.
They will take care of the mice that are going to come after these genetically engineered crops.
Well, and like the cats that like attack the alligators and win. You know, you've seen the video of them like. I don't know. I feel like just the way I've been lately and stuff I'm into, I feel like I would want to be on the quieter side of things instead of the more scholarly, even though I think the scholarly stuff would be rewarding and fulfilling.
You need a little break, a little brain break from that.
Yeah.
Go outside, touch some grass and garden.
Yeah, touch some grass. Exactly. But yeah.
So an avocation, that's like something outside of the realm of scholastic stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like something you could fall back on if you were like kicked out.
Okay.
Or not. Like Leo was reenacting a battle with allowing weeds to overgrow the backyard.
With his velour, which sounds like valor. I'm sure that was intentional.
Yeah, velour. Yeah. Oh, that's I didn't pick up on that one.
Ooh.
Oh, really? That's what it reminded me of, is like this valor and like Valhalla, and like that's what it reminded me of.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say I can see Christy doing this one.
Cooking, yeah.
Because she makes the best stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is also another way to contribute. But even people who were contributing greatly, like Orlo, he still had an avocation. So I think, didn't everyone have an avocation?
Yeah, like Jad was a Thatcher.
Oh, that's right. For the nuclear waste.
You know,
That's right.
for the nuclear waste dump.
I like that though. I feel like that's not the nuclear waste, but I
I
feel
love
like
nuclear waste. That's what I would do.
I know that's my calling. But I feel like ever since COVID, people are trying to find more hobbies to just get reward out of, and so I just kept thinking of like Real World, obviously, while I was reading this, but it was like,
Yeah.
Well, sometimes
very,
I watch
very
some of these crazy bookbinding projects people do. I think, like,
yes.
Oh my
I could
gosh,
do
yeah.
bookbinding
Or
something. You know,
Yeah.
I couldn't actually see myself doing
epoxy.
it. I'm not like they would all have weird, like nothing would be straight. You know,
You'd get better
although
over
maybe
time.
You would. Or those
be like Orlo's
epoxy
wine.
resin videos are so relaxing to watch. That would be cool.
Mm,
Which ones?
Like the epoxy resin, like
yes,
art.
those are cool.
Oh,
I thought it was so weird at first, and then it was like an hour later, I'm so relaxed, and I've just been watching someone make this like coffee table with epoxy resin and wood, and it looks like a galaxy. It's just really cool.
I saw someone do
interesting.
they made like a map. It was from Breath of the Wild, like a topographical map of Breath of the Wild, and they
Oh.
did epoxy pouring in resin for like all of the water in the
Ooh.
map, and I was like, oh, this is so cool to watch on
It's
so
so
many levels.
relaxing. It's
But like
Now, did
the
they get
epoxy
like
pouring,
that?
I was like, oh,
Did they
like
get
power
like the
washing.
color, or like the art style? Because Breath of the Wild has like this sort of, I don't want to call it cell shaded, but it's sort of like this very low contrasty kind of art style, like the colors and everything. It's like got a distinctive. I don't know. It's been a
Palette.
while since I've played it, but
Yeah, me too, actually.
like
But
a
my daughter
vibe.
plays it constantly. We have, I don't even
Oh,
know how many hundreds of hours between the two of us on the Switch for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
so now do you want me to ask you a really hard question?
Oh no.
Only if you want an awkward silence. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
While we think about it.
So are books created or are they discovered?
I knew that was gonna come up.
What was
Well,
it? I missed it.
I think that's really hard because again, my first like instinct is both.
so Rich,
But
when you said in the spoiler-free section where you said like Stevenson got like some flack for not all of his ideas, but like his ideas not being original, I was like, but don't they talk about this? Like the Avowed are talking and they're like, well, we're looking
Oh,
over these ideas, but we don't ever discover any new ideas. We discover ideas that people had discovered that other people forgot were discovered and things like that. So it's like, yeah, that's why they're reminding me.
yeah.
There are no
Well,
new
and these
ideas.
all, and this question, I mean, I always ask it, but it's like it's related to the central, like like realism and nominalism. So I never actually defined these two in case it wasn't clear from the book. So realism is the idea that that like like Platonic forms are actually a real thing, that they have an existence of some kind, like not like necessarily in our universe, but there's like some higher plane of existence, or in some way these things are universal, and and you can make the argument a circle is a circle. Even if you had some village on the other side of the world, no contact with anybody else, they would still have circles and triangles and things like that. Nominalism nominalism is the idea that no, these are ideas that we look at reality and we see patterns, and so we give names to things to organize them, but these are constructs. They don't really have any reality of their own, which I think is a more modern way of looking at it. But when you talk about like how stories like this, like how like you look at tropes in stories, like tropes are a lot like Platonic forms, like like to the building blocks of stories, and like people argue there's only so many, I don't know how many it is, like different unique story ideas or tropes that exist, and everything can falls into one of them. Like that's very much like the idea that books are kind of discovered, like they emerge out of the way you take these concepts and just put them together.
Mm.
It's but Christy, you also argue, well, you take these forms and you create the book. So it's just, I do agree. I mean, I don't know that it's kind of like, like how can you tell the difference? Which is actually, well, I don't want to say too much because that's going to come up, but.
No, but you're right though. Because, yeah, it's hard to say one way or the other definitively because I can see both sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
I missed the question. Could you say it again, Rich?
Are books created or are they discovered?
Ah, okay. I would say ideas are discovered, but books are created for sure. As somebody who has written books, it takes just an enormous amount of effort to gather the ideas and make form out of the chaos. I know some writers will say, oh yeah, I just wrote it down as it came to me. And I honestly think that's a very rare experience. Most authors maybe have like one book that came to them really easily, but most of the books, it's like pulling teeth. It is like such hard work to actually write, to make something out of the chaos of ideas out there. So,
well, I think you have to kind of have a chaotic, like an unbounded mind to come up with the ideas. Like Sanderson's like, let's take stacking stones and turn it into a magic system.
Yes.
Or whatever.
You'll never look at stones the same again.
Like it's like so creative. And yes, there's certainly, like, I mean, teaches a course on how to write books, so there's obviously a method to it, but then there's also like this, and even creation itself, how much is that discovery versus, it's, well, obviously it's a question that doesn't really have an answer, which is why people have been arguing about it for about 1,000 years, but.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I feel like too, like you said, Christy, a book or whatever, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Like the basic foundation art is discovered, and then what you do with it is the created part.
Right. Because like this is something that you do in writing workshops. They will give you an idea and have everybody write a story based on it, and all the stories will be vastly different. They won't be like the same. So, yeah.
Or even like cooking, like make your favorite chicken and rice dish. Everybody's going to use different spices, but the basic like building blocks of cooking are kind of
like watching Iron Chef or something.
Yeah.
Here's some natto. Go make stuff with it.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think it's so helpful to have Christy's perspective because Christy does write.
Yes.
And I don't. So like that's actually very helpful, Christy. Thank you.
I'm so glad. I think
even
there's so many. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I used to write a bunch in college. It wasn't like nonfiction, but studying those who have come before and like how they wrote and building on it. I mean, it just kind of goes with that. Like, I like how they played with language with this, or I like how they use that word and then make it your own. So you're, I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
There's like literally a book out there. There's like a thought stream of artists. I forget his name. Austin Kleon, I think his name is, something like that. He wrote a book called, it's like Steal Your Art. And his idea is basically there's nothing original, like the Avouts believe in this book. So just like steal inspiration from everywhere, because what you create, I mean, there's just so many decisions you have to make when you're telling a story, and it does become your own unique thing. So it's kind of both. There's like a lot of discovering what other people have already discovered, and then you make your own thing. And I feel like this book is a really good example of that. Like maybe the ideas aren't new, but the specific way he has arranged them all feels very fresh for me.
That's interesting. So I had a poetry professor in college, and she was talking about kind of stealing art. And so she had us read this poet, and she's like, take this one poem and then take the idea, but like make it your own. So it'd be like, this is my poem after Nikki Giovanni's insert poem or whatever. And everybody had such wildly different interpretations of it. So it was super fun.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly. I love that. We did that in creative writing classes too, where it was like, okay, take this poem and just insert your own kind of ideas into it, but the format is originally somebody else's, you know.
Yeah, or even just the metaphors that people come up with. If you're talking about the same thing, it's just so impressive. So
that was a good question, Rich. That was fun.
So, this is a comment, and I don't want to talk about it so much because you guys want to have a common, or you might have a different perspectives. I've been reading another book in between, Phantoms in the Brain, which is all about like brain damage and all the things it can cause, and phantom limbs, for example, or whatever else. And it's very fascinating. And of course, my wife had a stroke, and I'd seen some of these sorts of things firsthand, but it kind of resonated with me when, in the book, when they're talking about complex protism, which is like the idea of there's reality and then there's our perception of reality, which is kind of like a synthesis of all our senses, and then our ideas, and then the whole bit about the pink nerve gas farting dragon is the idea that your brain kind of filters and the senses coming in, and tries to make a story out of it that makes sense based on its own experiences and everything. And it's just really interesting how these go together, because like that's when you have brain damage, you get like these disjointed senses of reality and things like that, because the different parts of your brain that do all that stuff aren't actually coordinating correctly, or the same as everybody else, at least. And it's just such an interesting idea that, the way we perceive reality is distinct from a reality. And I think, if you think about that, in the sense of like what Sanderson does with like, the spiritual, cognitive, and physical realms, they're analogous. Now he does different things with it, but they're interesting analogies in the sense that like the space of our mind is in a sense something distinct from physical reality. I mean, obviously people say it's electrical impulses in your brain, but it doesn't seem that way to us. But I thought that was just something fascinating when I was reading. I got more out of that section than I think in previous reads. It becomes more relevant in like part 8, actually. So you'll get to it in no time. We'll talk about it next time.
Okay. I love when you're reading two books that kind of talk to each other, though. That's such a cool thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's why I always thought, like, I take tons of notes, like when I'm doing Stormlight, and I think like, oh, this is interesting. This is kind of like an example of nominalism, or it's which way is it in Sanderson's fantasy world? Is it nominalism or is it realism? I mean, I don't think that's what he's actually going for, but and then it's interesting to see where, the inconsistencies, because that's not something I think he's trying to be consistent with, or intentionally trying to speak to, but essentially because that's a world where an idea, can turn into a spren, and come stab you with a sword or something,
Ideas.
Everything circles back to Anathem.
Yeah. Well, somebody becomes afraid in the real world, and if you're in the cognitive realm, a fear spren shows up and becomes your, you got to run away before it comes after you.
Right.
So, do you want to ask a speculative question? Where do you think this is all going?
I have not a clue. I don't know where we're going with this.
Wherever the ride takes us, kitten. That's what's gonna happen.
Journey before destination.
That's what I keep thinking during this book. I just keep hearing you say it. Like, just keep reading. We'll get there.
Well, I'm glad you guys seem to be enjoying it, because I do feel like this is not a book that's for everybody. But I mean, this is a pretty diverse group, and I feel like it seems like everybody's been getting a lot out of it. So,
yeah, there are moments where I just don't have any clue what is being said, but
yeah.
but then there are moments that I do really enjoy it, and now that it's starting to pick up a little bit more, I'm like, okay, I'm really interested to see where we end with all this, how this all pulls together.
Yeah. And I think this discussion has helped for me, like, kind of solidify what's going on. So I feel a little bit more solid going into the next part.
I've been kind of dropping, because there is stuff in the world building, which I would say is reasonably clear at this point. That doesn't mean you've necessarily, because it's not always been set out right. And it will get set out right more. I mean, this is, honestly, Stephenson's a little like Sanderson in the sense that he'll drop ideas, but he'll kind of hammer them before you need to understand them. So you don't really have to worry too much about being lost, but you do get more out of it as once you kind of, it's a very rereadable book for that reason.
I can definitely see that. And I can see how people could just talk about it for hours on end because of all the ideas that have come out of it. Just from the first, 55% we've read so far.
Yeah. Well, most of this, I mean, most of the ideas that come into this book, and the next part, a really big, it's actually a modern idea. Actually, I just heard somebody do a podcast, a physicist do a podcast about it a couple of weeks ago, and it's a controversial idea that's largely not accepted, but somebody come up with some evidence that kind of supports it, and that'll get thrown in. Like, there's all these ideas just coming out. You wouldn't think, what's this have to do with this, and yet, oh, well, it's got everything to do with that, apparently. At least in this universe.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of you guys are always welcome to ping me or whatever. I can give you a straightforward explanation of something if you wanted. I just trying to avoid, because to me the discovery, like, I don't think you shouldn't go into this book knowing kind of what the setting is. I feel like that's part of the fun.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, because again, like, going back to Malazan, like, people have made full guides that you can, like, read as you go through the book. And so for this, at the beginning, because I didn't know what was going on, I was like, I want to read something after the chapter I just read, and there's, like, nothing. And so it's like, I don't feel steady on anything because there's nothing to reference.
There are some notes, like, there's like a foreword, which is kind of what, that, which kind of like a cheat sheet, and like there's a timeline, and
but there wasn't like anything online where it could be like, oh, like, like the Sanderson wikis, it's like chapter 1 summary, this happened, like just bullet points to make sure I caught everything.
No, nothing like that. There is an Anathem wiki, but it will be spoilery.
Yeah.
There's no
because you look up a character and you'll get their whole character arc,
Yeah, but the summaries, there's like nothing past chapter 1. And it's, at first I was so irritated because it's like, I just want to know what's going on. But it like forced me to like just trust the process and keep going.
Yeah, and one of the challenges is that in some sense, what's important I mean, it's kind of all important, but these are like, they're just examples. And it does remind me a lot, because I remember when I was young, like reading like some of the great books, and I'd go read some Plato or Aristotle or whatever, or like a lot of geometry stuff. And, like, it is very much like old philosophy, like dialogues, and, that's like, that's how they wrote back then. And of course, this is, set in a sort of stagnant present sort of world, but it's, the concept of like, oh, let's pull out your ruler and your compass and you can bisect a circle, and like, that's all classic. Like, that's, the Greeks love that, like their protractors, and that was like the greatest quest of the Greeks, was to try to square the circle.
Yeah. I can definitely see why people like it though, because just from like a literary standpoint, like, I like George Eliot and Charlotte Mary Young because they reference other writers and other books. and talk about them. And this references all the philosophy and all the science and all the math. And if that's something you're super into, I can see it just like eating it up. Like, this is so fun.
It is. It's like fan fiction of like all the philosophy out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because you take a book and you're talking about Plato on the one hand, then you're talking about polar and equatorial orbits, and and plane change maneuvers being expensive, and it's like, oh well, maybe as a prequel to the book, you should play some Kerbal Space Program or something.
Yeah. And then there'll be an interlude where they're talking about the leaves and the process of how to make them into pages for books.
Yes. I really did enjoy that one.
They actually, and it's like, oh, you take them and you stack them for 100 years, and you go find another box that somebody else left you from 100 years ago. Like, could you imagine like this project? Like, could you imagine today, like, oh, we're gonna cut up all these leaves? Why? So that somebody 100 years from now will be able to make books. Like, could you imagine in our society like having that kind of
what book would you
attention
choose?
span? Like, well, is that person 100 years from now going to pay me for these leaves? I'm doing an awful lot of work. It's like, yeah, but you get the ones that the 100 people 100 years ago, made for you. And it's like, well, why don't I take theirs and just skip the part where I leave any for the future, and they can go find some other way to make books. It's I mean, that would be such, I guarantee that would happen in a heartbeat. It's like, oh, cost-cutting measure, let's mine the ancient leaf reserves.
Or the just me first, like,
oh yeah.
Some people are here and now, and some people are like always forward thinking.
Yeah. It forces you to think outside yourself if you're doing those kind of practices. Although you were talking about the attention span, Rich, the very first tab that I put in the book was when Orlo says that he suffers from attention surplus disorder.
I have a highlight. I haven't posted any quotes, but I've got that one.
Yes, I love the quotes you shared.
Mm-hmm.
I like the bit where, I had earned Arsabalt's loyalty by speaking of lunch. That's a favorite.
There's just some really good, like, little funny comments that I enjoyed.
He's very good at one-liners.
He is.
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Varix tricked me into saying things I'd never have said to an Inquisitor. Then why on earth did you say them to a total stranger?
Yeah.
Yes.
There was one, I don't know where it is. There was one where they were talking about, I did tab it, but I won't be able to find it probably, where they're like looking for supplies, and they're like, well, all we have is a protractor, and someone's like, I'll get some string.
Problem solved.
Yeah. Our enemy is an alien spaceship with thousands of nuclear warheads, and we have a protractor.
Yep. We'll be fine.
Or like, it's like, how are we gonna get there? And Project's like, well, I thought we would fashion a sextant from first principles and determine our latitude and longitude. It's like, oh, it's like, oh, well, I've got this map here, and it's like, and it's like, he looks disappointed.
Having him there, and then like when Barb was there too, that dynamic was so funny because they looked at everything so differently than everyone else did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's interesting is like the only thing that's, in theory, the only thing about Project is just come from a group of people that have been locked away for 1,000 years. Yeah. But like to them, there's definitely a hierarchy. Like as the millennial, he is like the rock star.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can be president of the United States as far as any of these people are concerned. And I find that very interesting. Like just this idea that like these people, because they were turned into the consent before their umbilical cords had fallen off, they get sent up to the crag and they become the rock stars.
And somehow Erasmus is responsible for keeping him and Barb in line because neither of them know what to do in the real world.
Yes.
Yeah.
They got all the book learning and no common sense.
Yes. Yes. And I feel like we all know someone like that.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
I used to work with someone, he could do any math problem in his head. No problem. But like street smarts,
Whatever.
I
don't
can't
know if he would
identify with
survive
that
in the
at
real
all.
world by himself.
Oh, so funny.
It's good that they know how to be patient in explaining themselves, because they need to also reap the patience of others as others explain to them.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm scrolling through my quotes. I mean, there's tons of hilarious ones. But yeah. All right. Well, I'm definitely curious to see how you guys. Well, the action. Like, I feel like I picked this. It was either this or the previous part as an ending point. There's pros and cons, but because the advantage of stopping the previous part is then you'd start with action in the next. But honestly, I feel like ending with some action. I feel like it's kind of like a. We'll keep. Okay, there's some hope that something's happened, and we didn't even talk about like the martial arts monks showing up and just
Definitely. That was great.
I love how Erasmus is like, oh man, Leo's gonna be so jealous.
And he sends a messenger.
Yes. I'm kind of wondering how it's all going to converge, because all these other people who have been like sent out, they're over here, and then there's just a few of them that are going to get Orlo, and I'm like, how is this all going to be when they all? Because I'm assuming they're all going to converge again at some point. I'm wondering what that's going to look like. I don't get the romance, by the way. That came out of nowhere, and I was like, so once you found out that she was interested in you, now you're making out with her, now you're dating. Okay.
Welcome to dating in 2025, Tiffany.
Yeah, they're young.
I was just like, okay, you thought she was ugly until you found out she liked you, and now you're like, she's so beautiful. I'm like, oh, so flattery will get you everywhere with this boy.
Maybe it's like the monk when he just like saw her from afar. It's like, I'm in love with you, I want to marry you, and it's like, you don't know her.
Yeah, from the Italian.
Love makes no sense.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny because I was like, well, that seems like something a teenage boy would do.
Yeah.
It felt very true to a teenage boy, but I was just laughing about it.
And all the girls are like thinking he's horrible as a result.
Yeah, Tulia's like, what is wrong with you? Why did you say that to her? He's like, what?
Yes.
That is funny. Like, what did I do? It's like, you messed up.
What would he do without Tulia? I'm just saying.
For real.
That's funny.
Man. Well, I am more excited about the latter half of the book because I'll be honest, I was not sure how I was feeling for the majority of this section because it made me feel like a dummy. Same. But then after like discussing it, not like horribly, but like I just didn't know what was going on. But after discussing it and then it ending on action, like you said, it makes me more excited to see where it's going, especially since you're saying it keeps like ramping up.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's not, not uniformly so, but don't worry, there's still plenty of opportunity to get into Tellenian dialogue. But even more extravagant than some of the ones in the past. But it's definitely working. I mean, we've now got a ship full of aliens, who've thrown the Warden of Heaven out the airlock.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, what is going on with that? Okay. And Jezreel's up there.
I've seen enough more today. Thank you. And it's just like, oh my gosh.
I'm like, what's going to happen to Jezreel now? I don't know. He's still up there.
I cannot wait to find out more.
So it was a nice little cliffhanger to end on.
It is. Yeah, that's true. It worked out well. And the next part is shorter than this part. So I also we have less time between, only a couple of weeks between the two. So I figured this will be an easy read. I mean, granted, Stephanie will have it read, like, she'll start Tuesday, the week of, and
I don't know. I learned my lesson this time. It was hard.
Aw.
Not
Well,
like
I'll tell you, the next part you might want to have your thinking caps on.
yeah. Just because I was expecting to blow through it kind of like a Sanderson, but it's just more dense and you just need time to like digest it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I found Malazan harder in that there's just way more stuff. But the ideas here, I mean, think about it, he's dabbling in debates that have been unresolved since Plato.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not something. It's just fun how they're all explored these ideas, but you're not going to come out of this, it's like, oh, now I've got this all figured out.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better. So I'll still have questions at the end.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, you have a better understanding of this stuff than Plato did, and he's a pretty smart guy.
Wow, that makes me feel so much better, Rich. Thank you.
I feel so smart now.
Because I really did. I also felt very dumb for the entire first half of this book.
I know.
I was like, I'm going to talk to Rich, and everything's going to seem better, and it does.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I actually don't mind chatting about these ideas. Like, you just want to talk about them plainly or whatever. I mean, I can't tell you, who is right, the Calvinists or the Arminians or whatever, but whatever. It's
yeah, but it's nice. It's nice to have you because you've read it so much and you have a better understanding. So it's nice to have you kind of like help guide us through.
Yeah, but don't feel like I've got the right answer either. You guys have very different perspectives, and
yeah, but the discussions you're bringing up are good, and then it's kind of helped ground me in the story a little bit more, so I feel more steady going into the second half.
Thank you for the discussion questions.
Yeah,
they were really.
I've got another page just as long. And I'm going to bring up the musical selections. I had that one on the list for Victoria. So.
Hopefully next time.
Yeah,
I'm excited
save that
to
one
hear
for next time. Hopefully we can get her.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, if you haven't, go and listen to part 7, the intro with the Gregorian chant.
I'm gonna have to do that after this.
I'll see if I can find the Spotify link and post it in Discord or something.
I think you might have already, actually.
Well,
I might have even
posted. I'm sure I posted the whole album. The album's called Iolet.
Okay.
But I might be able to find the specific track.
Yeah. Okay. I will say the audiobook, I do quite enjoy the narrator because I feel like I would have missed some of the humor had I not heard his delivery of it.
Yeah,
the audiobook I think is really well done, and not all, but a lot of the dictionary entries are actually narrated by Neil Stephenson himself.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Was really cool. Yeah,
I noticed it was a different voice, but I didn't know it was him. That's cool.
Yeah. Now there's also ones. There's a woman narrator who does some of them, and obviously that's not Neil Stephenson.
Yeah.
I didn't think so, but
But he has a distinctive voice in there, and you can find. Unfortunately, this book was kind of, I don't want to say it's pre-internet because it was the mid-2000s, but it was like there wasn't as much YouTube and TikTok and that kind of stuff. There are some interviews and stuff floating around. It's got a lot of. He was working on a Millennium Clock project, like the idea of building a clock that can run for 1,000 years, and stuff like that.
He literally is doing that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was a part of.
Wow.
He was associated with or something, or introducing people to it or whatever. That was one of the inspirations, because like there's that whole section where they're talking about how the clock works.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, this counterweight's there, and just in case there's no civilization to wind up the clock, it'll still keep running for however long, because that's really important.
Does he have an advanced degree? Do you know?
I don't know what his background is. I'm sure he's got some kind of STEM background, but I don't know the details.
Just because just reading through this and then the way we've been talking, it's like he has got to have something, or maybe he's more like Bill Nye. Like maybe he doesn't have the PhD, but that's like his whole life is just, that's his hobby and his love is science.
Yeah, that's sort of a thing. I mean, clearly he's very well read.
Yeah.
He earned a
so many
BA
ideas.
in geography with a minor in physics.
Okay. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Geography. I was not.
Interesting combo.
Yeah.
I think that this is my favorite book because I need to read more of his books. One that people always seem to go to is one of his earlier ones called Snow Crash, because it was written in the early 90s and kind of predicted a lot of internet culture.
Interesting.
And that sort of thing. That's the one with the ninja mafia pizza delivery guy.
There's a whole bunch of
how
words
it
I didn't
opens up.
expect to hear together.
Like pink nerve gas farting dragons, you know. It's
Yeah.
Oh,
that
is that his
that
most
book-
popular work?
It might be one of his most popular. I don't think it's his best by far, but it's because it's been around so long.
It looks like
it's
on
certainly-
Goodreads, it's like it has twice as many ratings as the next one down, which is Cryptonomicon.
That one I've also read. That is also a very good book.
Wow.
Snow Crash has some issues. Honestly, all of his books are kind of exposition heavy at points. And this one, it's in the form of dialogues and things like that, where it's just very obviously, but in Snow Crash, it's a little bit more awkward the way it's done. But it's got some really interesting ideas. Because it's like modern internet culture meets the Tower of Babel.
Ooh, that sounds really
That sounds awesome.
And if you cannot understand how those two go together, then read Snow Crash. And it's also set in a kind of a semi-post-apocalyptic, like it's a very cyberpunk kind of setting where like corporations kind of run the world, and some of that sort of thing, where hence the mafia could be running your pizza delivery service or whatever.
Yeah. It's a lot shorter than this one too.
Yeah. I like the acknowledgments in this book. I just looked at him because I was trying to see what his degree is. But I like that he references Leibniz. And it's like, it just makes me think of the Big Bang Theory when Sheldon and Leonard are like, do you side with Newton or Leibniz about who did calculus first? It's like, I can see him writing a scene like that in here.
Yeah. That's actually one of the unfortunate things. So the use of language, and we'll talk about it more the next part when it'll be a little less spoilery. But you actually are learning a lot about modern philosophers, and you don't actually benefit from it as much because you don't actually know who all these people are because he doesn't call them by their names.
Yes. You become familiar with, and a lot of the ways he explains things, it's like he comes up with his own explanation for how to explain it to the common man. It's like, wow.
I think I would want like a
Garden's Steelyard
compendium
instead of Occam's Razor. The same idea, but just told in completely different ways.
Yeah.
And
I feel like
and there's sort of a reason he does it that way. But we'll get to it. And it has everything to do with realism and nominalism.
See, like that teacher that's like, I'm not going to tell you. I want you to figure it out for yourself. So you learn it better.
You tell me what you think it means.
Because that's what I do as a trainer. I'm like, you tell exactly what Tiffany just said. You tell me what you think it is, and I'll tell you if you're right.
Yeah, except this is a book, so it won't tell you if you're right or not.
Tiffany.
He kind of job. I mean,
it's a
some
novel.
of these concepts get more and more explicit as you go along.
Okay.
I would say the book takes certain opinions, but not on the nose. Like there's definitely plenty of room for interpretation, and maybe that's because maybe that's my interpretation of it. Somebody who has the opposite take might find the book just as strongly in their favor. We shall see.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'm excited to see where the next half
going
goes.
to turn out to be Protians or Halicarnians.
Oh, I missed the difference between those.
I don't know. Yeah,
the Protians are the realists, and the Halicarnians are the nominalists.
Okay.
I feel like for me it
syntactic
depends
or
on
the
the day.
semantic faculties you might have also heard. I've read this too many times.
No, I love that though.
I'm speaking in Orth.
It's very helpful.
Orth.
Especially when you don't have a glossary in your book. It's very helpful. When everyone else does.
And it would be so nice to have like Occam's razor is this in this book. This is this.
Yeah, the Pythagorean theorem is the arachidonic theorem. Stuff like that.
It's funny.
Maybe Rich just needs to write a guide.
And I had to go look up Erasmus to remember what it was that he did. So, it's
okay.
I do know who Erasmus is.
Yes. Raz.
I wonder if anyone called him Raz back in the day.
That's what we all know.
Well, somebody called him Raz in the book.
No, I mean the original Erasmus.
Oh, I gotcha. I can see it though.
Call him Raz. I'm gonna call him that from now on.
Maybe he had Riz.
Raz is Riz.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, on that note.
That's been a fun conversation. Who would have thought you would spend a fun Saturday afternoon talking about Plato?
Yes.
Yeah, for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting this, Tiffany.
Yes.
And we barely got into the orbital mechanics.
Right.
That was something I didn't understand either. And I was like, I'm just going to keep reading.
For that part, you just got to play Kerbal Space Program.
Nice. Well, the finale show will be on Tiffany's channel on April 19th at 1 p.m. EST. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I have Tiffany's Discord link below, and Rich has filled the Anathem channel with many lovely thoughts.
Yes, he has.
And it's nice to catch up on them as I go through.
Mm-hmm. That's what I did too.
By the reactions on all your comments. So, yeah, and I'll have everybody linked down below. And thank you everyone for watching and everyone who joined. And we will see you guys next time.